Hello, welcome to It Ain't New, the show that represents the history of ethnic minority groups in the USA and where knowledge becomes power. If you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar,
your very real hosts.
Hello, our fellow Dandelions today. So we're actually going to be talking about something that we all have very strong opinions about, and that is the model minority myth. And in this episode, we want to talk about when this term came about, why it came about, and what was the political environment and issues of the time. And then we're going to get into some of the other stuff that comes out of using this term and the ramifications that this particular term has for not just Asian Americans, but for every ethnicity, every race, everything that you can think of, like all the people under in this country and in this world. Like, what are the ramifications for everyone involved? So we can kick this off with the historical aspect of it, right? So actually, let's start with this. What does model minority actually mean?
That's a good question.
Which is one we've been kicking around like a football for like the last 2 hours, I feel like.
I mean, the way they use it in sociology and in politics is literally what it's supposed to be. Like, it's this one particular minority group, which I'm not going into ethnicity because it doesn't actually go on ethnic group. It's literally minority group in the categories usually that we have for the census, which is all kinds of messed up. So one particular minority group that has excelled, that, you know, kind of like went from nothing, almost like Drake, like started from the bottom, now we're here kind of thing, you know, went from nothing. Now they're at the top of everything. They're the best in education, the best in wealth, the best in just about everything, to be honest. And then kind of using them as this is the standard of how pretty much non-white people in the United States, and I mean more white and Caucasian, not white in the census category now. White and Caucasian, non-white and wealthy white in particular.
My question is, what is the difference?
Well, the census is all kinds of messed up because in the white category, you also include Armenians. You also include a lot of Middle Eastern countries and ethnic backgrounds. Even sometimes you actually include parts of Africa. And yeah, so like even if there is like a South African person that immigrates to the US, if they are also actually phenotypically and look white, they're going to want that person to mark white as a category versus them marking African, which is an actual category on the census. So I mean in the sense of like wealthy non-white or perceived as good non-white, again, that's model minority, non-white people in the United States.
Okay, so for me, my perspective of model minority as an Asian American, right, has always been that it is literally an impossible existence or an expectation for Asian Americans to be perfect. And historically, historically in the States, that's what it's been, right? So especially in recent years, just hearing it, it's like, oh, model minority. And immediately it's like, oh, that Asian kid that is expected like straight A pluses in high school who goes to the really
goes to Harvard,
rich fancy school or rich fancy college, you know, all that stuff. Probably has immigrant parents who immigrant does not always mean poor.
Right.
So that's the imagery that pulls up. Thank you, media, for that. But also thank you for the social brainwashing that the term model minority really uses.
How about you, Estar?
What's weird about the model minority myth is that people still believe in it. they don't think it's a bad thing.
Mm.
They think that it's actually aspirational.
I need to snap to this.
And so
Shoot, I forgot what button that is.
it's just such a like a mind shift when you realize that it's setting up it's setting minorities up in one sense to fail collectively, but individually it can be sort of truth. Like it's like the worst lie. The worst lie has a good amount of truth in it, and that's why it's so believable. Right?
Stereotypes always have a grain of truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess my next question is this: when were you told or taught that it's a myth? Because I mean, the question could be, when did you first hear model minority? And truth be told, like that was a thing from like middle school for me. But like I never thought about it as a myth.
Well, I
until
grew up
college.
with a street corner preacher, so that was always
Yeah.
like I mean, I grew up literally in the household, like we actually talked more about Malcolm X in my household than we did about Dr. King.
That's
which
a great
is kind
thing.
of interesting considering that my dad and my mom were both pastors and we were both inner city missionaries, literally doing like gang prevention and like teaching and all of that. But again, we still got, Malcolm X tendencies.
But hey, like you said,
and Yuri Kochiyama,
but like
we're
you
gonna
said,
hit the ground
right?
running.
Like you said, like there needs to be a certain level of anger for it to literally light the match and light the fire.
And it's also, I think for me, it wasn't just like that. It was also realizing, I think it was probably in middle school or high school, maybe, probably more so in high school, because I'm getting more, remembering stuff. When I was a part of a group of Black kids at the school who were told by our counselor that there were certain schools we should not apply to because we're not going to get into them. But then it comes to the school that I end up going to, which almost like if you're in education, you know about the school. And if you're in like certain parts of just things, or if you read Forbes, like about my school,
Right?
But for him to like say that we should not apply because we're not going to get into them when we're all going to the same freaking STEM high school, and we're all making having a B at this school was like you just didn't turn in work. And so we're all getting A's, we're all doing really well, and he's like, you're just not gonna go or don't even try because you're not going to get in. And then I get into the school and there's like other kids that literally got rejected and it had nothing to do with our actual like race, because this school is a PWI school. So for those who don't know, PWI stands for predominantly white institution. So prep school Negroes, we know what that is because I was always a prep school Negro. But yeah, like the having like that's when I kind of understood, oh no, you're thinking something because of how I look and not even looking at my grades. And you're telling me I can't get into a school because of a certain background. Right. It's kind of like the intro to The Princess and the Frog. It almost made me like super pissed off and not watch the movie when I saw the intro. But when they go, that scene when they're like, oh, a woman of your...
I've never seen it.
I've never seen it either.
We have to watch it. But I have very interesting feelings about it. It is a good film.
Which is why I've never watched it.
But I have interesting feelings about it because it's what it was created to replace.
Right.
But that's another like conversation. But yeah,
so
breaking that down.
Yeah. So you and I, like, you have that experience where it was always taught in your household, more or less, like this is what it is.
I mean, I was also around a lot of like poor Asians too. So,
and I come from a community where visually if you're looking in, it looks very much middle, upper class Asians. There were a good amount that were not, but we blend in. So my experience was like definitely, oh, model minority works for us. Also, again, that grain of truth in there, right? Like that lie that has to have that grain of truth. And that grain of truth was very true and very visible until college for me. But Estar, I think you have a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, for me, what my family went through was kind of the reverse of that. We showed up, like we immigrated in as the model minority, and then my family fell into hard times, and we quickly kind of devolved from that. So, but that was the standard, and then we fell off that standard. And I think for a large like swath of my family, there's this like prevailing sense of like, we were that and now we're not that, and we don't know why. And like working back towards that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so our paths towards realizing that this is not true, because it's like the Asian American dream, right? Like we want to be that kind of family that everyone's like, oh my gosh, you don't need it. You're perfect. You got money. You're like a whole family, and like all that. Your kids are going to Harvard. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, why is it always Harvard? Harvard students got tutored by my students at my school.
Well, you know what I think it is? It's all the romanticized dramas, depictions of Ivy League schools.
I guess so. I will have to say this. If you go to a university, you're not being paid attention to in undergrad. Just putting that out there. Like it's very hard to get research assistants. Like it's very hard to break out in there. They, kind of brag on a lot of stuff, but you got to work.
Can I slip in a little bit of an Asian American mentality towards that for younger generations? It is like a brand name bag. You don't go because it's great education. You go because it's Harvard. It's like you get that Louis Vuitton bag, not because it's pretty. It's because it's Louis Vuitton.
That's true.
I
get it. I wanted to go to Harvard too. Harvard was a big thing,
right?
But my dream school was Duke. So
yeah, it's that like, oh, it's an Ivy League. I go because it's an Ivy League. Whereas like if you go to UC, it's like I go because it's fairly decent priced ish.
Right.
We got some of that.
There's issues with that now.
But like UCLA, public school, still like what, top 1 and 2 usually every year?
Yeah. Berkeley as well.
Yeah.
See, now what's interesting to me about, we just said like, oh, every like Asian American kid wanted to go to Harvard. For me, one, I'm not a good student. And so I knew early on, like I'm intelligent, but I'm bad at school.
Right.
And so I knew early on, I'm a model for nothing. And then secondly, even if I had wanted to go to Harvard, I have never wanted to go to Harvard. A big part of me choosing where to go to college was money. Even if I had gotten into Harvard, which I wouldn't have. I barely graduated high school. Even if I had gotten into Harvard, I would not financially have been able to go, not even if they gave me a full ride, because college isn't just about tuition.
Right.
College is about having money to do all sorts of other things.
Exactly.
Just to live is actually a very difficult thing for college students.
It was hard for me to even get through. Like I went to state college first and finished at a city college, and I'm fine with my education. But at the end, I was getting paid to go to school.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
which I needed.
I want to also bring up here, like, it's not a shameful thing to go to a state college.
It
It's
is
not even
not
a shameful thing to go to trade school.
Or a community college.
I wish I had gone.
Right.
I'd still go. Sometimes
yeah.
I'm like, I want to be a welder, yo.
There's a part of me that wishes that more families, and I'm speaking more to the Asian American families, like, please, parents, stop forcing your kid to go and attend all the AP classes or all the IB programs or the millions of hours of tutoring that they have to go to, because you're probably, one, exacerbating some mental health issues there. Again, you're also putting this pressure of like, you need to be perfect. If you're not getting all these grades, all the money I spent on you, if you're not getting straight A's and you're not going to all these, you're a fail of an Asian. Like, I remember hearing all that, not necessarily from my parents, but they also gave up on me when I said I did not want to go to Harvard or Yale. Because again, I'm with you on the I'm not a great student. I can fake my way through it, and I got decent grades. Like I wasn't on the verge of
I didn't
dropping
even
out.
get decent grades.
But my decent grades were I'm going to take those harder classes for me, and those harder classes were AP Bio. I didn't even bother taking AP Chem because I nearly failed Chem honors. But like when I tell people and I tell teachers of my academic history, they're shocked because I took 6 AP courses. Most high schools in the US offer 3. My high school now is offering 10? For what? For what? You want freshman kids to come be like, I'm done with high school at like.
And I'm gonna say something on that too, because my school was a STEM high school. It was also semi-private. That just meant we did not necessarily have to pay to be there. That's what I meant by semi-private. But everything else with like the
Did you test in?
We didn't test in. We interviewed in.
Oh.
And we were interviewed by an alum, 2 teachers, and I think depending on which group you ended up being in, it would be like the principal or somebody else. So it was all people who were at the school. And my school was also like working closely with Northrop Grumman and Boeing.
So they were probably like, we want this to be a feeder program.
Oh no, it definitely was. We had kids whose parents were either working for either one of those companies or who literally went straight into internships at those companies right after high school.
Ooh,
right?
I'm hearing nepotism to some degree, but you know what? Not against.
To be honest, at least for a lot of the kids that I did meet, we all had, or for the most part, we all had a reason to be at this school. Like we were all interested in, like I ended up going there because they were one of the only schools in my district that not only offered Japanese, but also, again,
Yeah.
my whole history. But yeah, not only offered Japanese, but I wanted to be a child psychologist. And they were the only school that had anatomy and statistics as AP courses.
And you needed those to get into the program.
Exactly. And I needed those because that's where I was going. I knew I wanted to be a child psychologist or work somewhere in psychology. And those were the classes that I was going to need. But if you don't know what you're going into, please know. Like we're still known as the nerdy school, but it was that like we were, we knew what we were going to do. So most of the kids, they knew they were either going to go do something in tech or something in science or something in math, like, or even engineering. Like we just knew we were in those
But
places.
not every kid is cut out for that. And,
No.
and it's totally fine for kids to not take the extremely difficult classes because maybe for them difficult is already taking the regular classes. And that's totally fine.
Right.
But I think what a lot of parents get stuck on is like, oh no, the end goal is that you need to have like a really fantastic job that pays like 6 or 7 figures or like, and then to them, that journey starts when you're 5.
Yeah, like I get it, but I think, and I'm very glad that my mom was able to do this in a sense, but I think it kind of just worked out because we were like, she was a pastor's wife and like a traveling singer.
But she modeled a different lifestyle.
Yes. And really what it was, she started to see what both my brother and I were already leaning towards. And she was from the South. So even coming to LA, like she knew we were going to be different. Right. But she saw what we were leaning towards. And I was already leaning towards humanities. I was already leaning towards like, hey, let's do some like mind work type stuff, you know, like what's going on? And then my brother was actually more of the one, he was leaning less towards like art and everything. He didn't do that probably until like middle school or high school, but he was the one asking my mom like, hey, can I go take this like college course at the community college that's like on like coding? He was doing this in 6th grade. Like he literally asked her and she was like, well, I'm going to find a way for you to do that, them to do what they were going to do. But I always got told this though. My mom was like, we are literally missionaries. And because of the denomination we were in, the pastor could not have an outside job. So we were heavily dependent on whatever money was coming into the church, right? So she would always go to me and just tell me, and she also didn't understand much because again, coming from Mississippi in like the 70s and 80s, like you're kind of getting basic stuff, right? So she goes, well, you know you need some scholarships. Like, you better get those A's because I don't have the money to pay for you to go to college. I know you're going to, but I don't have the money for it. This was actually why I never ended up going to Duke, because I got into Duke, but I did not have the money for the outside stuff. I had no family, no nobody. So I was like, well,
how are you going to pay for rent? How are you going to pay for food? How are you going to pay for transportation?
Exactly. So I'm like,
how are you even going to get there to freshman day?
Thank you. So I was like, what?
And even if you get to freshman day, how are you going to get to graduation?
Thank you. Like, I was just
all
like,
real concerns.
I can't. And what happened was my school literally did that. They paid for my ticket to go there. They paid for all of my room and board. They even created scholarships for like all of the students on campus if they needed it.
Right.
To be able to do things. We had drivers literally every weekend to take us to, like, we needed to go to the grocery store, if we needed to go to New York, if we needed to go to Boston. But that was just because it was a school. But it was a baby Ivy, so baby Ivies, in my opinion, are better.
Do you want to give a shout out?
That's all to all my Williams peeps. Ephelia rules. Us purple cows. I know we have the weirdest thing, but still, like, it was, I do like their at least where they're kind of going with a lot of this stuff. Like, you know, we even took out actually, for, I guess, a shameless plug on that, Williams College has actually taken out loans from their financial aid packages. And also taking out, we used to have a summer earnings where you, like, during the summer you had to earn, I think, like $1,500. That was a whole thing. Like, during the summer you had to, it was mandatory. And if you didn't do it, people were literally taking out loans to pay for it. Cause I actually took out one, but that was the only debt I graduated from Williams with.
That's amazing.
Was that $1,500.
Which is a lot less than some people who graduate from state schools.
Exactly. But also I paid that off within less than a year.
Yeah.
Babysitting.
Yeah.
So like that was their mindset. Like, even if you did take out a loan, you weren't going crazy.
You're not going to pay 30 years of your life with that.
No. So they would literally they would go to alums and be like, hey, we have this student who needs like $30K this year. Can you like finagle that?
That story is amazing to me because, like you, Nyke, my mom told me, I ain't paying for your college. You got to pay for it. But then she actually, some part of her expected me to mortgage my future to go to like a good school. And when I told my guidance counselor at my specialized high school in New York that money is a real concern and I refuse to go into debt because I have other family who mortgage their future and are still like bound by that. And I was like, I won't be that way. I actually got into trouble with my guidance counselor because why? I was messing up the quota, her quota for kids in the senior class that were going to good schools because I was going to a state school. And
which could also be a very great school.
Right.
We're not doubting that. I'm just saying,
like, amongst
this
us,
guidance
we're not,
counselor, I was messing up her quota.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was not being a model minority and aiming to go to, you know, like Harvard, basically.
Yeah.
And even if I had gotten into Harvard, I wouldn't have gone because of the money.
And
she
also,
was not hearing any of that. And guess what? She was Black. And she was still like laying it on me. She wanted my mom to come in and I had to tell her, my mom doesn't speak English. So whatever you have to say, you're going to have to say it to me anyway. Because she thought she would talk to my mom, who probably, if she could have, would have taken the guidance counselor aside.
Right. Absolutely. Asian parents with that. Yeah, I got really lucky in the sense that, one, I never really doubted that I was A, going to college, B, ever going to have to pay for it. Thank you, Mom and Dad.
I didn't want to go.
Really?
Mom forced me to go. She literally packed me up and dropped me off.
So the thing is,
freshman day, yeah.
You see, you're saying you're not a model for anyone. I say that you're a model for rebels. Those that don't fit in the system.
Rebels don't want models.
Well, that's the thing. You would think that, right?
The revolutionaries do, though.
But right, but like for
being
me,
a rebel and a revolutionary is different.
But the thing is, for me as a kid, I was like, I don't see a different path. I see the path of least resistance.
That's really interesting.
And then I see the path that like I know will take me somewhere in the direction I want to go in. But there was no like, how do I get there? Like who's the one with the flag that I could kind of see and like mark my spot?
But that's the trap of the model minority.
Right.
If that's the only model you have and your parents buy into that,
right.
Who's going to teach you that there could be
that's why
a road
say,
less taken?
That's why I say you are a model for those of us who are a little
I didn't
more...
see that road, But I just knew that I didn't want the road.
Right. You
that
didn't
was
want
in front.
you didn't want the path that was already marked.
Yeah.
Because that meant that you can't change your future as easily. You're not in charge of your future if you're bound by debt.
See, this is also what's interesting too, as I'm like thinking about it. When a lot of my Asian American friends would talk about like certain things, or when, you know, some of them who were struggling with math would have to be like tutored by me. Which is like it's a sad thing that has to like that is something.
You
like
know what
why
I
can't it
heard?
just be a friend helping out another friend?
You know what
with
I
their
heard
math
a lot of
homework?
times when I was struggling with AP Calc? You're a bad Asian because Calc should be easy for you.
My Asian friends told me that.
And this wasn't coming from my Asian friends. I actually had a couple, because I was doing color guard, which by the way is already a very like, Asians don't really do that. We do if you come from the state of California.
Right.
But it is very a female dominated activity, very white dominated, although that is changing. But I had instructors that were probably the first ones that were those that I like engaged with intentionally and on a very regular basis for that amount of time. And they were African American. I will still say that I do think that like certain things that they taught me at that time, you also have to account for their age, and they were fairly young in their mid-20s. But they would say this stuff to me.
Because that's how prevalent
the idea
has become.
right.
This idea has become like a
and
thing to where people actually hold it. Because even if you look at Disney TV shows, I remember, because I actually wanted to do this as a project and I still will, but I remember watching, there was an episode of the original Proud Family. I haven't seen the new one. Don't at me on anything, because I really don't care, to be honest, because Disney is funny in that way. But yeah, so episode of the Proud Family, they kind of tried to emulate like Romeo Must Die a little bit, which is kind of funny, because it was supposed to be like Romeo and Juliet or whatever. But every time they referenced the Asian characters, it was always because they were like the ones at the top of the class, right?
Yeah.
And then there's this whole thing of like, again, like a kind of Romeo Must Die. There's a little romance maybe happening and all of that. But they're doing this, and I'm like, you are literally having this go on in a kids TV show that, again, they're going to remember. I remember that. And this was like 2 episodes of the entire show. They were not, which is also kind of sad for the show, but they were not like main characters coming on all the time, all of that stuff. But it's like, oh, interesting. But nobody remembers that one unfortunate Asian dude on Smart Guy who was actually one of the bullies. But yeah, it's like interesting that like you kind of keep putting this in there. So of course they're going to think that, because you're going to keep telling them that.
Right.
Or even if you look at kind of one of the things that happened with even the LA riots between Blacks and Koreans, a lot of people were perceiving Koreans as like, you guys are coming in and you're taking the money out of the Black community and you're doing this. Now, there were some people that, but you're also forgetting the fact that like, one, banks were not giving loans to Black people. And then when they were giving loans to Koreans, they were purposefully doing it at higher interest rates. And on top of that, saying you can't even put your store in a predominantly white wealthy community. So where else
red
zoning are
zoning
you gonna go?
The term is red zoning.
Exactly.
And redlining.
But again, they're not going to tell the Black people that.
Oh no.
And then they're not going to tell the Asians that like this is what's happening. Like
and
this is why they don't like you. Thank you all for listening to It Ain't New, where if you don't know, now you know. We're Nyke,
Bella,
Estar.
Please show us some love on Spotify by leaving us a rating or a review, and join our Patreon so we can grow and continue to give you all wonderful content.